Okay, Carlos Watson, Sage Steele, Van Jones. What do these three folks have in common? Well, they're all people who have been prompted up by wealthy or powerful white Americans, and yet we, the keepers of the culture, don't really rock with any of them like that. Now, obviously, the three of these folks are most definitely black faces. However, they're not necessarily black voices. And there's a difference. Let me explain. Take a listen to these half-witted, self-hating remarks from Sage Steele.
Barack Obama chose black and he's biracial. I'm like, well, congratulations to the president. That's his thing. I think that's fascinating considering his black dad was nowhere to be found, but his white mom and grandma raised him. But hey, you do you.
What? So that is undoubtedly a black face, whether or not she knows it, but it is most definitely not a black voice. Yet I'm sure someone is giving themselves a big diversity pat on the back by having that modern day minstrel show, Sage Step and Fetch It, on the airwaves spewing her continued nonsense. Now let's listen to Jeff Bezos's black friend, Van Jones, after a Donald Trump speech.
He became president of the United States in that moment.
Okay. Now, let's be clear. Van and Carlos are far from being sage, but there's certainly something to be said about wealthy and powerful white people elevating certain voices over others. By now, I'm sure you've all heard about Carlos Watson and the implosion of Aussie media. In Aussie's 8 years in the marketplace, the media company never really achieved prominence in the field of journalism, nor did it ever make an impact producing multimedia content. But that sure didn't stop investors from filling Watson's coffers with more than $70 million in funding. Why? Because he had that gift of making white people comfortable. Now, for those of us who don't prioritize their feelings over our actual equality, funding for our platforms is far less available. In 2017, venture capital investment reached just over $84 billion. Now, that's a height not seen since the dot-com bubble of the early 2000s. But practically none of that money went to startups run by people of color. A majority of funds went to college-educated white male founders. And, of course, it's the wealthy white folks who are writing the checks. Studies have found that white people make up more than 70% of venture capitalists, while 25.2% are Asian, only 1.7% are black, and just 1.3% are Latino. Now, in 2016, discrimination and bias in favor of companies run by white men caused the U.S. to lose out on over 1.1 million minority-owned businesses and forfeit more than 9 million potential job opportunities. So a word of advice to the landscape of the rich and powerful. Perhaps instead of investing in people of color who make you comfortable, you may want to give a second look to those of us who make you uncomfortable. After all, we've been uncomfortable for a mighty long time, and we are actually the ones who likely rock with the communities you're trying to reach. This is why there's such credo in spaces we create ourselves. Credibility is crucial, and doing all things for the culture is key. So while some of you keep raining $100 million on people not invited to the cookout, you're starting to look more like the villains in Get Out. During the unrest the past few years, I heard from many CEOs and others in leadership positions say with confidence that they've had really honest conversations with their black employees. And let me just tell you, no, you didn't. You had a meeting, and perhaps there was likely some candor in the remarks, but do understand there is a meeting after the meeting, and that's where the honest dialogue took place. And for many, being a part of this cultural shift is all well and good until we start to talk about a power shift, where we're not asking to be hired, but we're the ones doing the hiring. And if that makes you uncomfortable, but this does not.
Barack Obama chose black and he's biracial. I'm like, well, congratulations to the president. I think that's fascinating considering his black dad was nowhere to be found, but his white mom and grandma raised him.
You should ask yourself why.